Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of her phone, her finger hovering over the delete account button. It felt like an easy decision, but her heart raced with every passing second. She had spent years building her social media presence, sharing moments, memories, and a carefully curated version of her life. Yet, the weight of the secrets she was hiding made it harder to keep up the facade. She couldn't keep pretending anymore. Her phone buzzed again, and Emma glanced at the screen. Another message from him. "Are we still on for tonight?" Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. How could she erase him too? He had been a part of her world for months now, an affair that felt too thrilling to walk away from, yet too dangerous to continue. She deleted the app. But her iPad was still logged in. The sight of the messages and notifications filled her with dread. Could she truly move on? Could she erase everything? The reality of her decisions felt heavier than ever. The night dragged on as Emma found herself lost in thought. The decision to delete her social media accounts had felt almost liberating at first, like shedding an old skin. But now, with her iPad still logged in, she couldn't escape the nagging doubt that lingered. Had she done the right thing? She stared out the window, watching the city below her, the lights blinking like distant stars. Every light seemed to represent a choice she had yet to make. Her phone was silent now. No more messages, no more reminders. But the guilt lingered, like a cloud in the back of her mind. She glanced back at the iPad. The connection to him, to the life she had hidden away, was still there, just a click away. She had erased the evidence from her phone. But had she really erased him? She was trapped in a world she had created, one that seemed impossible to escape. What would happen if she just left it all behind? Could she really move forward? The morning after, Emma awoke with a strange sense of emptiness. She could still feel the tension in her body, the unshakable weight of her decision. The first thing she did was check her phone, even though she knew the notifications were gone. But it was more than just the phone. It was the silence that had replaced the constant buzzing. The emptiness of a life once filled with messages and moments. She sat up, her feet touching the cool hardwood floor, feeling the coldness of the world outside her sanctuary. She hadn't even heard him come by last night. Had he tried to contact her? Did he even care anymore? A pit grew in her stomach. She grabbed her iPad. There it was, the message from the night before, still blinking at her from the screen. She had deleted everything, but not him. She thought about the lies she had told, the moments she had stolen, and she knew she wasn't ready to let go. As the day wore on, Emma tried to ignore the pull to check her iPad again. She told herself she wouldn't go back, but her mind couldn't stop replaying the moments she had shared with him. She had convinced herself that deleting everything would give her freedom, but it only intensified her longing. She found herself standing in front of the iPad once more, her fingers brushing the screen. The messages, the calls, everything she had hidden in the dark corners of her life, beckoned her back. A sense of loss filled her chest. She realized then that she hadn't deleted him, she had just silenced him for a while. But silencing wasn't the same as letting go. She wasn't ready to face that yet. Instead, she stared at the screen, her finger hovering above the icon, wondering if it was time to finally face the consequences. The doorbell rang, breaking her out of her trance. Emma froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Could it be him? Had he come to see her? She walked toward the door slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected him to show up, but she knew she was still drawn to him. With a deep breath, she opened the door. There he was, standing in front of her, just as handsome and as dangerous as she remembered. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her. How had things come to this? She hadn't even thought about the consequences, just followed the thrill. But now, with him standing in her doorway, the weight of it all felt overwhelming. The silence stretched, and she knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. Emma stood in front of her door, staring at him. The man who had become both a symbol of forbidden desire and a source of deep conflict. His presence was intoxicating, and for a moment she wondered if she could forget everything. her doubts, her fears, the life she had built. He looked at her, eyes dark with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. "I couldn't stay away," he said quietly. His voice was low, rough, like a man who had been through things that left him scarred, but not broken. She could feel her heart racing, her mind urging her to close the door and walk away. But his proximity, the way he filled the space, made that impossible. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. The touch was soft, but it ignited a fire inside her, something she couldn't explain. She had spent days convincing herself that she was done, that it was over. But now, standing face to face with him, all the reasons to walk away seemed so distant. He leaned in slightly, his breath on her neck, and whispered, "It's not too late, Emma. You don't have to be alone." She stepped back, allowing him to enter. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in the small, dimly lit hallway. Her pulse quickened, and she could feel the weight of every choice she had made. The air was thick with anticipation, and she couldn't help but feel like she was walking into something she wasn't prepared for. "I shouldn't have done this," she whispered to herself. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You don't have to apologize, Emma. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" His words were gentle, but they stung. She had wanted this, no matter how much she tried to deny it. He had been her escape, her secret world. But now, in the cold light of reality, she felt like she was sinking deeper into a situation she couldn't control. She turned around to face him, her breath shallow. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. His lips curled into a smirk. "I want you, Emma, all of you." She wanted to push him away, to tell him this was a mistake, that she was done. But the words stuck in her throat, as if something inside her was holding her captive. The man moved closer, stepping into her personal space, his presence overwhelming. Emma could feel the heat of his body, the pull of his energy drawing her in despite every warning bell going off in her head. "You know you want this," he murmured, his fingers lightly grazing her arm. The touch was electric, and despite herself she shivered. She had told herself she was stronger than this, that she had control over her actions, but in that moment she felt powerless. He took another step closer, his lips almost brushing her ear. "You can't keep running from what you want," he whispered. "You can't hide from me anymore." The words shattered the last of her resolve. She closed her eyes, the fight leaving her body. This was her choice, her responsibility now. Without another word, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or slow, it was desperate, as if he had been waiting for this moment just as long as she had. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the world around them disappeared. All that mattered was the way his lips pressed against hers, the heat of his hands as they tangled in her hair. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. She had made the choice, and now she had to face it. Every part of her screamed that this was wrong, that it was all going to end in disaster. But the other part of her, the one that had wanted this, the one that had been craving the thrill of secrecy and danger, didn't care. She wanted more. When they finally broke apart, her chest was rising and falling quickly, her pulse still racing. "You're not alone, Emma," he said, his voice husky. "Not anymore." Emma stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stared at him, her thoughts swirling in a storm of confusion and desire. He smiled, but it wasn't the smug grin she had seen before, it was softer, more knowing. "I'll be here, whenever you need me, Emma," he said. She could feel her resolve slipping away, the walls she had built around herself crumbling with each passing second. "I don't want this to end," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "Then it doesn't have to," he replied, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "You just have to stop fighting it." The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Emma knew then that this wasn't just a fleeting affair. It was a turning point. Whatever came next, she wouldn't be able to walk away from it. Emma sat in the coffee shop, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. The warmth of the drink did nothing to soothe the cold knot in her stomach. It had been a week since she'd seen him, and yet every moment felt like it was filled with him. She thought she was free of the turmoil, that deleting everything had finally put an end to it all. But now, each time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, felt his touch, heard his voice. It haunted her, this constant pull between the life she knew and the dangerous path he represented. He'd been right though. She had stopped fighting it for a moment, but now it felt like she was drowning in everything she hadn't wanted to face. Was it love? Was it obsession? The lines blurred in her mind, and all she knew was that it felt real, even if it was entirely wrong. The door opened, and she tensed, her heart racing. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. His presence filled the space, and as always, she felt drawn to him. But now there was a part of her that was afraid of what it meant. She finally looked up, her gaze locking with his. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure what this meant anymore. He walked toward her, his eyes never leaving hers, a quiet confidence in his step. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, and despite herself, her breath hitched. "You don't get to walk away, Emma," he said softly, his voice low but firm. "I'm not leaving, and you can't just forget about what we have." She felt her throat tighten as he stood in front of her, the weight of his words sinking in. She had tried to convince herself that deleting him from her life meant the end of it, but the truth was, she was just as lost as before. "I don't want this to control me anymore," she whispered, though it felt like a lie as soon as the words left her lips. Every inch of her body screamed for him to stay, to pull her closer, to erase the doubts. But there was something else, the knowledge that she could lose everything if she gave in again. The man reached out, his fingers grazing the side of her cheek, and for the first time in days, she let herself close her eyes and feel the familiar warmth of his touch. His touch was a fire against her skin, and as he leaned closer, Emma felt the world around them blur. All of the promises she had made to herself, all the reasons to stop, melted away in an instant. She hadn't been able to walk away before, and now she was even less sure of herself. "I know you're scared," he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. "But you're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'll always be here." She should have pulled back, should have told him this was over, that it wasn't what she wanted. But instead, she found herself leaning into him, her body betraying her. She had been scared of getting hurt, of losing herself. But there was a part of her that wanted the danger, that craved the chaos he brought into her life. And in that moment, it felt like that was the only thing real. He kissed her again, harder this time, more urgent. Her hands moved to his chest, and she felt the strong beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. She wanted to resist. She knew she should. But she didn't. The kiss ended, but the air between them still crackled with tension. Emma stepped back slightly, her breath shallow as she tried to regain some sense of control. "What are we doing?" she whispered, her voice shaking. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took her hand and led her toward the door. The city was still bustling outside, but the world felt distant, as if they were the only two people who mattered in that moment. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "You're not done with me, and I'm not done with you." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but they also made her feel alive in a way she couldn't explain. She had been running from this for weeks, trying to convince herself that she could control her emotions. But now, standing in front of him, everything seemed so much simpler. She could feel the pull between them, and it was impossible to deny. They walked out into the street together, the city lights flickering above them, both of them caught in a moment that neither could escape. As they walked down the street, Emma felt the weight of her decision. She had been searching for an answer, trying to figure out what she wanted, but now she realized that the answer had always been in front of her. She wanted him. It was that simple, and yet it terrified her. The man had given her everything she was afraid of, and now, as they walked through the city together, the world felt both new and familiar. She was crossing a line she couldn't uncross, and deep down, she knew that once she crossed it, everything would change. But at that moment, she didn't care. She was no longer pretending. She was no longer fighting. She was with him, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. "You're not going to regret this," he said, his voice calm but filled with assurance. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "I already do," she replied softly, but the smile that played on her lips told a different story. Emma sat in the car, staring out the window at the rain as it poured down in sheets. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, none of them settling long enough for her to make sense of them. The past few days had been a blur, a mixture of intense desire, confusion, and guilt. She had told herself that everything would be easier once she gave in, once she let herself experience what she had been running from. But now, with the silence between them growing heavier, she realized how wrong she was. Her heart felt like it was torn in two. One part of her wanted to embrace what she had with him, the other part wanted to run as far away as possible, to erase it all and pretend like it never happened. She glanced over at him, sitting quietly beside her, the tension palpable in the small space between them. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she said, her voice soft but filled with fear. "I never wanted it to be like this." He looked at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Understanding, maybe? Regret. "You don't have to make sense of everything right now, Emma," he replied, his voice calm. But there was a hardness to it now, like he knew exactly how far they had gone. "We're in this together. We always were." The car came to a stop in front of a small, quiet apartment building. Emma didn't want to get out, didn't want to face whatever was waiting for her inside. But she knew she couldn't run away forever. As much as she tried to convince herself that the relationship with him was nothing more than an escape, a momentary lapse in judgment, deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was something real here, something that was pulling her in, even though every part of her was warning her to turn away. She could hear the sound of her heart thudding in her chest, the blood rushing in her ears. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice low, breaking the silence. "I'm not going anywhere." His words were both a promise and a challenge, a declaration that this wasn't over, no matter how much she tried to make it end. Emma hesitated, then finally opened the door. As she stepped out into the cold, she could feel him right behind her. Every step felt like she was walking deeper into the unknown. "I don't know if I can do this," she muttered, barely above a whisper. "Then let's find out together," he replied, his hand brushing against hers. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Emma stood near the door, not knowing where to go, what to do. She felt like a stranger in this place, like everything she had been running from was now catching up to her. She had come here for a reason, to be with him, to give in to the pull that had been there from the very beginning. But now, standing in this small, unfamiliar space, the reality of what she had chosen hit her harder than ever. "I don't want to be scared anymore," she whispered, almost to herself. "But I don't know how to stop feeling this way." He was behind her now, close, but not touching her. His presence was calming in a way, like he was waiting for her to come to him, to make the next move. "You don't have to be scared, Emma," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here, you're safe with me." The words were like a balm to her frayed nerves, but they also reminded her of the fragility of everything she had come to believe about him, and about herself. Emma didn't know how long they stood there in silence, just looking at each other. The space between them seemed to grow and shrink with every breath she took, like a dance neither of them knew how to perform. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and yet it was strangely comforting. Finally, she stepped forward, the air between them charged, and took his hand. "I'm not sure I can trust you," she said, her voice shaking, but there was an edge of defiance in her tone. "But I want to." He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, without a word, he pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. For a moment, Emma let herself lean into him, let herself feel the warmth of his body against hers. It felt like a promise that, no matter the mistakes they made, no matter the uncertainty, they would face it together. She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her ear. "We'll take it one step at a time," he whispered. "One step at a time." Emma woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the apartment window. It was early morning, and the soft light of dawn was creeping into the room. She turned over, surprised to find the man still asleep beside her. For a moment she just watched him, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his face relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. She had never allowed herself to feel this vulnerable, but now, with him beside her, everything felt different. She wanted to believe that they could make it work, that everything she feared was just a shadow of her own insecurity. But the truth was, she didn't know what would come next. She had allowed herself to fall into this moment, to lose herself in him. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. "I'm not sure where this is going," she whispered to herself. "But for now, I'm here." She gently turned to face him, the warmth of his body radiating next to hers. He stirred slightly, then opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. Without a word he pulled her closer, and she let herself rest in his arms, trusting in the moment, trusting in them. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty. Emma had decided to give herself fully to the moment, to accept what was happening between them. But deep inside she still felt like she was walking a thin line between freedom and a cage. Every time she looked at him, something in her chest tightened, and yet there was comfort in his presence, an unspoken promise that he wouldn't let her fall too hard. The apartment had become a strange sort of haven, a place where she could escape from the chaos of her mind. She could feel herself growing attached to him, something she had sworn she wouldn't do. "I don't want to get hurt," she confessed one evening, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the vulnerability in it was unmistakable. He looked at her for a long moment before responding. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said firmly. But there was something else in his eyes, an understanding, a hint of something darker. "I'm not going anywhere." Emma wanted to believe him. She needed to, but the uncertainty of it all lingered, wrapping around her like a weight she couldn't shake off. As time passed, Emma found herself letting go, if only for moments at a time. She allowed herself to laugh, to be present in the simple things, like cooking together or sharing a quiet evening. But the weight of their unspoken bond was always there, lurking in the background, reminding her that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. It wasn't just the love that scared her, it was the control, the way he seemed to always know what she needed before she even said it. There were moments when she felt like he was reading her thoughts, knowing her better than she knew herself. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted one night as they sat together on the couch, the soft glow of the TV illuminating the room. "You're doing exactly what you want," he replied, his voice steady. "And that's the only thing that matters." Emma wasn't sure she agreed. There were still pieces of herself that felt lost, pieces that she wasn't sure she could ever get back. But in that moment, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel like she was in control of her choices. One evening, everything changed. Emma came home from work to find the apartment eerily quiet. The lights were dimmed, and the door to the bedroom was ajar. Her heart began to race as she walked toward the room, her mind jumping to conclusions she wasn't ready to face. She had expected him to be there waiting, but the absence of his presence felt heavy. She pushed open the door, her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't there. But on the bed, she found something, an envelope with her name written in his handwriting. Trembling, she picked it up and opened it, reading the words that sent a chill down her spine. "You're not the only one I've been with, Emma. This was always going to end." The world seemed to stop. Her hands shook as she held the note, her mind reeling with disbelief. She had always known there was something too perfect about it, something too easy. But she never expected this. The door opened behind her, and he stepped in, his face unreadable. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said, his voice low. "But it's the truth." Emma couldn't breathe. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the weight of his words. She had thought she knew him, had allowed herself to believe in their connection. But now, with the truth hanging between them, it all seemed so fragile. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I trusted you. He didn't answer immediately, and Emma could feel the seconds stretching, the silence deafening. Finally, he stepped forward, but she backed away, holding the envelope like a shield between them. You knew what this was, he said, his voice calm, almost detached. You knew there were other women, other things I couldn't share with you. Emma shook her head, the tears welling up in her eyes. I never wanted that. I wanted you, she cried. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. I can't be part of your world, not like this. His eyes darkened, but there was no anger there, only a quiet sadness. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma, he whispered. But this is who I am. Emma left the apartment that night. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know how to escape the heartbreak that seemed to be swallowing her whole. She had given so much of herself to him, trusted him with pieces of her soul, and now it felt like everything was falling apart. She walked the streets aimlessly, her mind racing with questions and anger, but most of all with regret. What had she done? How had she let herself get so deep into something she knew could never end well? The city around her seemed distant, a blur of lights and shadows, nothing more than a backdrop to her emotional chaos. Eventually, she found herself sitting on a bench by the river, the cool breeze on her face. She pulled her knees to her chest and closed her eyes. I don't know how to move on, she whispered to herself, the words hanging in the air. But deep down, she knew that moving on was the only choice she had left. It was time to let go and start over. The journey ahead would be hard, but Emma was determined to face it, no matter how difficult. She had learned that the hardest thing wasn't falling in love, it was letting go. It had been weeks since Emma left the apartment, but the decision to walk away had not been easy. Her life had been in turmoil, but slowly, piece by piece, she had started to rebuild herself. She moved into a new apartment, one that was smaller, quieter, but also full of potential. Every morning the sun poured through her bedroom window, filling the space with light, a reminder that she was starting fresh. The process hadn't been easy. She still thought about him sometimes, about what they had, and about the hope she once felt. But there was something different now. She had rediscovered herself in the silence. She didn't need him to complete her, she had learned how to be whole again. She spent her days focusing on herself, going for walks, taking yoga classes, and writing in her journal. It felt like she was finally coming back to life, and for the first time in a long while, she was proud of the woman she was becoming. As she stood in front of the mirror one morning, applying makeup, she saw a reflection she barely recognized. It was her face, but the eyes, those eyes were stronger now. She smiled at the change, at how much she had learned from the pain. One day, Emma received a message from a friend, inviting her to a small gathering at a local cafe. It had been a while since she had socialized, and she realized that she was hesitant, unsure of how to interact with others outside her new bubble. But something inside her urged her to go, to step back into the world and reclaim the pieces of her life she had put on hold. When she arrived at the cafe, the warm, inviting atmosphere immediately made her feel at ease. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and soft music played in the background. She walked inside, scanning the room for familiar faces, her heart pounding in anticipation. As soon as she spotted her friend, a wave of comfort washed over her. "You made it!" her friend exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the past few months lift for a brief moment. As the evening went on, she found herself laughing, talking, and reconnecting with the world she had closed herself off from. She didn't realize how much she had missed it until now. As weeks passed, Emma continued to build her life. Her mornings were filled with new routines, her evenings with quiet reflection. She started to focus on her passions, the things she had pushed aside in her pursuit of him. Writing, painting, cooking, she found joy in the simple moments. But there were still times when memories of him crept into her mind, moments when she wished she had never met him, when she wished she could erase the entire experience. But with each passing day, those thoughts faded a little more. She learned that growth wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and moving forward. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, the sunset painting the sky in hues of pink and purple, she felt a sense of peace. She had made it through the worst of it. Her heart still carried the scars, but they no longer felt like chains. They were reminders of her strength, of the woman who had overcome everything life had thrown at her. "I'm stronger now," she whispered to herself, her voice filled with quiet pride. A few months later, Emma found herself in a place she never thought she'd reach. She was happy. Truly happy. Not the fleeting kind of happiness that depended on someone else, but the kind that came from within. She had built a life on her own terms, one that was hers to control, free from the uncertainty that once defined her. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was enough. She had learned to let go of the idea of perfection, to stop chasing something that wasn't meant for her. "I've learned how to love myself," she said one evening, speaking aloud as she gazed at the small painting she had just finished. It was of a sunrise, representing a new beginning, something that felt fitting for her journey. Emma had found her own rhythm in life, her own happiness, and it was something no one could take from her. She had moved on, not because she had forgotten him, but because she had come to terms with her past. She was no longer afraid of her own future. The world was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them. It had been a year since Emma had walked away from him, and while her journey had been long and difficult, it had been worth it. She had found a new sense of purpose, a new direction in life. She had rediscovered her passions, her ambitions, and most importantly, her worth. The old scars had healed, and the emotional weight that had once consumed her was now a distant memory. One day, as she sat in her favorite cafe, sipping coffee and reading a book, she realized that she was exactly where she needed to be. She was no longer looking for validation or approval from anyone. She was content with who she had become. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" It was her friend from the cafe, the one who had first invited her to step back into the world. Emma smiled and gestured for her to sit. She didn't need to look back at her past to know how far she had come. She was at peace. "I think I finally found my way," she said, looking out the window, her expression content. "And it's enough." Emma walked through the park, the crisp autumn air brushing against her skin. 2 years had passed since she left him, and the weight of her past no longer held her down. She had rediscovered herself, learned to embrace the quiet, and found peace in the silence. I've come so far," she whispered, smiling to herself. "I'm free." The leaves danced around her feet, their vibrant colors a reminder of the change that had taken place within her. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen in disbelief. His name. "I've been thinking about you. I miss you." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear from him again. For a moment, she froze, unsure of what to do. "Do I even respond?" she wondered aloud. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, wondering if she was ready to reopen that door. "I've moved on," she whispered, but still, doubt lingered. Days passed, and Emma's mind kept returning to his message. She had typed and deleted responses countless times. Finally, one evening, she sat down, took a deep breath, and typed, "I've moved on, and I'm happy." She stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. She didn't need him for closure. She had found that within herself. "It's time to let go," she said quietly, hitting send. The response never came. At first, Emma felt a pang of disappointment, but soon, it was replaced by relief. She realized that the silence was exactly what she needed. "I don't need him to validate me," she said to herself, a smile tugging at her lips. "I've been whole this entire time." The weight of her past was gone. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt wide open. A few weeks later, Emma sat in her favorite cafe, enjoying a warm cup of coffee. Her friend asked, "Do you feel like you've found what you've been searching for?" Emma smiled softly, her eyes sparkling with newfound peace. I've found what I needed, she replied. I've learned that everything I need, I already have within me. She looked out the window, feeling a deep sense of contentment. And that's enough.